only arrives when something in life has cracked wide open. Ethan Cole had just finished washing the last lunchbox for the morning. His 8-year-old daughter, Lily, was asleep on the couch with a book on her chest, the television flickering silently in front of her. He froze when the knock came again, louder this time, carrying urgency in its echo. For a split second, his heart jumped to the worst possibilities that single parents know too well: a school emergency, a neighbor in trouble, bad news wearing a uniform. When he opened the door, rain rushed in with her. Clara Bennett stood on his porch, soaked to the bone, mascara blurred beneath red-rimmed eyes. The woman who always seemed composed at neighborhood barbecues, the woman who smiled politely and kept her life carefully folded away from the world, now looked like someone who had lost her footing entirely. She asked him if he could stay the night. Not in the way people assume. Not in the way temptation whispers. But in the way a drowning person reaches for anything solid. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, in doing the right thing even when no one is watching, take a moment right now to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs a reminder that integrity still exists, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this matter because they remind us who we can choose to be. Ethan stepped aside without hesitation. He gave her a towel. He gave her dry clothes that had once belonged to his late wife, clothes he had boxed away but never donated. He made tea with hands that trembled not from desire, but from the weight of responsibility he carried every day since the accident that changed his life 3 years ago. Clara's husband had left that night. Not for the first time, but for the last. There had been shouting, accusations, and finally the slam of a door that didn't promise return. She had no family in town. No one she trusted. Except the quiet man next door who woke up at 6 every morning to braid his daughter's hair and pack heart-shaped notes into her lunch. The storm outside rattled the windows as Lily stirred and blinked herself awake. She padded into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes, and stopped when she saw Clara. Children sense brokenness like they sense thunderstorms. Lily didn't ask questions. She simply hugged Clara's waist and said she could sleep in her room if she wanted. Clara's composure cracked at that. Ethan made up the sofa with fresh blankets. He told Clara she could take his bedroom if she needed privacy, and he would sleep on the couch instead. But she shook her head. She didn't want to be alone in a strange room. She didn't trust her thoughts. She asked him again, quietly this time, if he would just stay the night. He understood what she meant. The world might misunderstand. Neighbors might gossip. But he understood. He looked down the hallway toward Lily's bedroom door. He remembered the nights after the accident when he couldn't sleep, when silence roared louder than any argument. He remembered wishing someone would sit in the same room, just to remind him he wasn't the only living soul left breathing. So he said yes. But when Clara gestured toward the bedroom and told him he could take the bed while she used the sofa, something inside him settled into clarity. He refused the sofa. He didn't refuse her. He refused the easy version of the story. Instead, he carried a mattress into the living room and laid it on the floor beside the couch. He told her he would stay there, in the open space between her and the hallway that led to his daughter's room. Not because he didn't trust himself, but because he respected her pain too much to blur it with loneliness. The decision changed everything. Because in that quiet living room, separated by nothing but dim lamplight and the steady rhythm of rain, 2 adults sat awake and let truth breathe without expectation. Clara spoke first, her voice barely more than air. She talked about years of trying to hold a marriage together alone. About shrinking herself to avoid arguments. About pretending bruises were from cabinet doors and silence was normal. She hadn't come to Ethan because she wanted comfort in the romantic sense. She had come because she knew he was safe. Ethan listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer solutions. He didn't turn her pain into an opportunity. He just listened, something the world forgets is an act of love. When she cried, he passed tissues across the small distance between them but didn't cross it physically. When she trembled, he told her she wasn't weak for feeling broken. He told her strength sometimes looks like leaving. Hours passed. The storm softened. At some point, Clara fell asleep on the couch, exhaustion finally claiming her. Ethan remained awake on the mattress, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in slow circles. He waking up in the morning. Integrity, he had learned after losing his wife, isn't about what you do when life is simple. It's about what you do when you're lonely. Morning came gently. Sunlight filtered through curtains that still smelled faintly of rain. Lily tiptoed into the living room and saw them, Clara asleep on the couch, Ethan on the mattress beside her. No tangled sheets. No confusion. Just quiet presence. She smiled. Over breakfast, Clara looked embarrassed. She apologized repeatedly. She worried she had imposed. She worried about rumors. But Ethan shrugged it off with a softness that came from years of carrying grief without bitterness. He told her she could stay as long as she needed to figure things out. And she did. Days turned into a week. Clara found a lawyer. She found courage she didn't know she still had. She found a job she had once given up to support her husband's career. She moved into a small apartment across town, furnished sparsely but honestly. Through it all, Ethan helped, not as a savior, but as a friend. He watched Lily bond with Clara over homework and baking cookies. He watched Clara slowly rebuild her confidence, piece by fragile piece. And yet, he kept boundaries. He didn't move too fast. He didn't blur kindness into courtship. He allowed space for healing, because he knew what rushed love can destroy. Months later, when Clara's divorce was finalized and the bruises were no longer fresh in memory, she came over one evening with a homemade pie. Lily was at a sleepover. The house felt quieter than usual. They sat at the kitchen table where that stormy night had begun. Clara looked different now, steadier, lighter, but not untouched by what she'd endured. She told him she had been thinking about that night often. About how he had refused the sofa. About how he had chosen the harder path when no one would have blamed him for taking the easy one. She said it was the first time in years she felt truly safe around a man. That word settled heavily between them. Safe. Ethan swallowed past emotion he rarely allowed to surface. He admitted that night had been hard for him too. Not because of temptation alone, but because it reminded him how deeply he missed companionship. He confessed that loneliness can make even good men justify selfish choices. But he didn't want Lily growing up in a home where kindness came with conditions. That was the moment everything shifted. Not with fireworks. Not with dramatic declarations. But with understanding. They didn't rush into romance that night. Instead, they began again, slowly, intentionally. Coffee dates in daylight. Walks in the park with Lily chasing pigeons ahead of them. Honest conversations about fear, trust, and what healthy love looks like after damage. The neighborhood did talk, of course. Whispers floated over fences. Assumptions were made about that stormy night. But truth doesn't require defense when actions speak consistently. Clara built her own stability. Ethan continued being the father Lily adored. And when, nearly a year later, they finally held hands in public for the first time, it wasn't out of desperation. It was out of choice. Ethan realized something profound in the process. That refusing the sofa had not been about furniture. It had been about foundation. He had drawn a line that said compassion does not equal possession. Protection does not demand reward. Presence does not require payment. One evening, as Lily practiced a school presentation in the living room, she paused mid-sentence and looked at them sitting side by side. She said she liked when Clara was around because the house felt warmer. Children notice everything. Clara's eyes filled, but this time with gratitude instead of pain. Years later, when Ethan and Clara eventually married in a small backyard ceremony surrounded by friends who had witnessed the entire journey, the story of that night was shared quietly among those who mattered most. Not as scandal. Not as gossip. But as proof. Proof that character reveals itself in private moments. Proof that love built on respect outlasts passion built on impulse. Before we reach the final part of this story, if it has touched something inside you, please take a moment to like the video,